somehow survive a nuclear attack in these homegrown bunkers. It was a notion my father soberly explained that was nonsense, without wading into the larger issue, which was that technology untethered from morality had a lethal doomsday edge. At school, there were nuclear drills. I recall lining up in our grade school corridors and then returning to our desks to practice duck and cover maneuvers, as if crouching under one's desk would be a sufficient response to an atomic event. My point is that even from a child's point of view, there was a certain peril and a certain degree of willful denial that permeated the air of the 1950s. And as I would later discover in reading Silent Spring, it was this peril and purposeful avoidance of inconvenient truths that Carson was able to use to such powerful effect in her searing exposé of the identical, equally deadly dangers of chemical pesticides, exploding public complacency almost overnight. I remember the awfulness of the food during the 50s, too. The occasional TV dinner my mother served. My sister and I didn't like them. The food was gluey and tasteless, we thought, though we did secretly like the way the little foil trays separated each foodstuff into a neat compartment. McDonald's was beginning to appear in the landscape by then. I don't specifically remember stopping at one, but I do remember my mother marveling at the bargain basement price for a burger, just 19 cents, she said, and that the food was standardized, even to the point that the mustard and pickles had already been added. The kitchen was a mechanized assembly line. Even the patties were made by a machine. Later, long before I had read Jane Jacobs' Death and Life, I remember driving into Cambridge with my father, passing a bank of bleak public housing towers along the way, feeling their enemy from the car. There were no people anywhere. And then arriving in bustling Cambridge. I liked the narrow, winding streets immediately, the beautiful old brick buildings there, the crowded one-of-a-kind bookstores and steamy coffee shops. I didn't know Jane Jacobs had written about the virtues of just such a human-scaled neighborhood, that she had used her own tatty block in Greenwich Village, where people stopped and talked, where even strangers looked out for one another, as a contrast to these sterile government-engineered housing projects, which, amputated as they were from the body of the city, were socially dead, leached of the street life that connected a community, the incidental public spaces that served as social moorings. Being a kid, of course, I couldn't see the lines of connection between all these things. Engineered housing, wartime chemicals, industrialized agriculture, manufactured food. I didn't know that they were actually different faces of the same problem, part of the same cultural push to bend nature and natural systems to serve mankind's ends. It wouldn't be until I was in college in the 1970s that I understood the extent to which much of what was passed off as food in the average supermarket had been manipulated to the point that it wasn't really food at all, but rather the spawn of some food technologist, working in a gleaming chemistry lab somewhere, or knew that the residues of industrial endeavors were turning up in the shells of birds, in mother's milk, in the blood of children, in the body fat of all Americans, or that DDT had nearly wiped out the bald eagle and the peregrine falcon, among other species, thinning their eggshells to the point that they could no longer properly hatch, just as Carson had warned. Or even that my own gut feelings about the life and cheer of a place like Cambridge versus the sterility of the high-rise housing projects routinely pushed by urban planners went beyond personal taste, that there were solid, sensible explanations behind these visceral responses. By then, I had joined my generation in its growing aversion to the technocratic direction of American life, its repudiation of America's war machine, its protest against the chemicalization of food and farming, its alarm over the plunder of nature and the parallel plunder of America's cities, its quest for social justice and local solutions, its worry over the loss of place and community. I believed, inoculated with the arrogance of youth, but also as conventional history would have it, that these ideas had begun with us, with the counterculture. Yet returning to that time, and to these 4 visionary women.